You ever get the feeling that people only show up when they need something from you? That your kindness is met with silence, your loyalty with betrayal, and somehow you're the one left questioning yourself? Let's be honest, being played for a fool doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you ignore the signals, when you give without measure, when you confuse silence with peace. And if you've been there, you know how soul-crushing it feels. But here's the truth, no one tells you. Being taken for granted isn't about your worth. It's about your habits, and habits can be unlearned. In this video, we'll break down 7 hard truths about why people take advantage of you, and how to stop it using the clarity and power of Stoic philosophy. You'll learn to draw lines that protect your energy, stop overgiving, and finally be seen for who you are, not just what you offer. If you're ready to stop being the easy one, the silent one, the one who always gets left behind, hit like, subscribe, and let's rebuild your strength from the inside out.
Number 1.
You don't set boundaries. When you don't make it clear where your line is, people will keep crossing it. Not necessarily because they're cruel, but because human nature always tests for permission. If you allow late replies, people stop replying at all. If you tolerate sarcasm masked as humor, it escalates. If you say yes to every request, they stop asking and start expecting. Epictetus warned that we are not disturbed by events themselves, but by our judgments of them. And when you judge your silence as harmless, you become complicit in your own exhaustion. This is the quiet trap. The more you avoid conflict, the more conflict builds behind your back, and the less you speak, the louder people assume they can walk over you. But the truth is, boundaries aren't just about others. They're about you, about restoring your own self-respect. Because when you don't set them, you slowly become someone you don't even recognize. You nod when you disagree. You smile when you're exhausted. You help when your soul is empty. And in doing so, you betray yourself in the name of harmony. So why do people play you when you lack boundaries? Because without them, your life becomes open access. You become the one who's always available, always understanding, always quiet. But that's not kindness, that's self-erasure. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." Boundaries protect that tranquility. They say, here is where I end, and someone else begins. They create clarity, for you and for others. Now, many avoid boundaries out of guilt. They fear saying no makes them selfish or unkind. But that guilt is a learned response. It's the leftover conditioning from years of being praised for pleasing others. But Stoicism doesn't reward people-pleasing. It rewards integrity. And sometimes the most moral, most necessary word you can say is no. Not to harm someone, but to honor yourself. Look at someone like Oprah Winfrey early in her career. She said yes to everything. Interviews, appearances, demands. It nearly broke her. She later said one of her greatest breakthroughs was learning to say no without explaining herself. That act alone restored her energy, her peace, her direction. Because boundaries don't limit your life. They define its shape, and it's not just celebrities. This applies to anyone who feels spread thin. A mother who gives everything and forgets herself. A leader who carries everyone's burden but neglects his own. It's universal. Here's the paradox. When you set boundaries, you might lose people, but you'll find peace. You might disappoint others, but you'll finally stop disappointing yourself. That discomfort you feel when you speak up, that's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something unfamiliar, but essential. And like any skill, boundary setting gets easier with time and repetition. Start here. The next time something feels off, pause and name it. The next time someone makes a demand, ask yourself if it aligns with your values. The next time you want to say no, Say it with calm, not apology. Boundaries are not weapons. They are instruments of alignment. They don't shut people out. They help keep the right people in on terms that protect your peace. In the end, the people who truly value you will not be offended by your boundaries. They will be relieved because they too are looking for realness, not resentment. Let your life be shaped not by who you fear losing, but by the standard you set, a standard that honors your time, your energy, and your self-worth. When you set boundaries, you're not pushing others away. You're finally stepping into yourself.
Number 2.
You're too trusting. Trust is a beautiful thing, but when it's handed out too easily, it becomes dangerous. You might believe that giving people the benefit of the doubt is a sign of strength, and in a way it is. But if you're giving away trust like candy, without requiring consistency, without watching for patterns, you're not being wise, you're being vulnerable to exploitation. Stoicism doesn't tell us to be cold. It tells us to be discerning. Epictetus said, "Don't just say you've read books. Show that through them you've become stronger, not just more knowledgeable." That's the heart of it. Trust, like virtue, must be tested. Think of trust like a bridge. You don't build a bridge across a river in a single step. You lay one stone at a time. Likewise, people should earn your trust gradually over time, through action, through presence, through character. But if you skip this process, if you hand over your trust based on charm, similarity, or superficial connection, you put yourself in harm's way, because manipulation doesn't wear a villain's face. It often smiles. It often flatters. It often says exactly what you've been hoping to hear, and that's why it works. Look at someone like Maya Angelou. She once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." That's not cynicism. That's clarity. It means observing without judgment, but also without denial. And that is exactly where most people fall into trouble. They confuse kindness with trust, but kindness can be universal. Trust must be selective. You can wish someone well and still not let them into the most vulnerable parts of your life. Now, here's where it gets subtle. Sometimes you trust too easily because you assume others think like you. If you're honest, you expect honesty. If you're loyal, you expect loyalty. But the Stoics warned against projecting your own virtue onto others. Seneca wrote, "The first step toward correction is to recognize the fault." And the fault here is not just in others, it's in your assumptions, in your unwillingness to look twice, to ask questions, to observe without needing to immediately believe. The truth is, being too trusting doesn't make you righteous. It makes you blind. And that blindness is what others prey on. Not just malicious people, but selfish ones, immature ones, people who see your openness as opportunity. And every time you overlook inconsistency, every time you excuse what you should examine, you reinforce a cycle where you give too much and receive too little. So what's the remedy? It's not to become cold, it's to become wise. The Stoic path is not about closing the heart, it's about training the mind. Let your trust be a gate, not a wide open door. Let people earn their way through with character, not charisma. Pay attention not to what they say, but to how they behave when there's nothing to gain. And when someone shows inconsistency, don't explain it away. A single event might be forgivable. A pattern is a warning. In practice, that means giving people space to reveal themselves. Let time be your ally. Trust slowly. Revise quickly. Observe how they handle stress, how they respond to your boundaries, how they speak of others behind closed doors. These are not small details. They are mirrors of character. And if you ignore them, you'll keep being surprised by betrayals that were quietly advertised from the beginning. Trust is earned, not given. And when you live by that truth, you stop being easy to fool. You stop handing out access to people who haven't earned it. and you start building relationships rooted in reality, not in hope, not in fantasy, but in what is proven. That's not pessimism, that's protection. And that's the way of the Stoic.
Number 3.
You ignore red flags. Deep down, you often sense when something is wrong, a strange tone, a contradiction in words, a moment that feels off. But instead of trusting that inner signal, you override it. You rationalize. You tell yourself not to judge too quickly. You give the benefit of the doubt again and again. And in doing so, you trade your intuition for illusion. You silence the very voice that was built to protect you. That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. The Stoics taught that reason is nature's gift. It allows us to see not just what we want to see, but what is, Marcus Aurelius wrote. If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth I seek. Now reverse that. If someone repeatedly shows you their truth through action and inconsistency, why do you keep pretending it's something else? The problem isn't that the red flags weren't there. It's that you refuse to look, because sometimes comfort is more attractive than clarity, until it isn't. And let's be honest, you ignore red flags because they threaten the story you want to believe. Maybe you want the relationship to work. Maybe you don't want to start over. Maybe the truth is just too heavy. But clinging to a false peace always leads to deeper chaos. As Seneca put it, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Red flags are not adversity. Ignoring them is. Consider someone like Robin Williams. Behind his laughter, there were signs of deep emotional pain. Friends later admitted they saw the warning signs, but didn't want to believe them. That doesn't make them bad, it makes them human. But the lesson remains. When the signs are there, they must be faced, not avoided, because every time you look away, you lose a part of your clarity, and clarity is the foundation of strength. The truth is, your mind often sees the red flags before your heart is ready to accept them. That's why emotional intelligence is not just about feeling, it's about seeing. It's about letting logic and instinct work together. When something feels off, your job is not to shut it down. Your job is to pause, to reflect, to ask, what am I pretending not to know? Now, this doesn't mean you live in suspicion. It means you live in awareness. The Stoic doesn't jump to conclusions, but he also doesn't bury his head in the sand. He watches patterns, he gives people space to reveal who they are, and believes them when they do. That balance between patience and perception is what protects your peace. Because when you trade awareness for comfort, you pay the price in regret. And here's the deeper truth. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you, it trains others to keep raising them. It tells them your standards can be bypassed. Over time, this erodes not just the relationship, but your own inner compass. You begin to mistrust yourself, to wonder why things keep going wrong, and the answer is almost always found in what you saw, but refuse to act on. So what do you do when a red flag appears? You listen, you wait for the pattern, and when the pattern repeats, you act. Not in rage, but in self-respect. You don't need dramatic confrontations. You need quiet decisions. A boundary, a shift in access. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is simply not showing up where you're not respected. In the end, red flags are not the problem. They're the warning lights. The problem is your refusal to look. But once you start seeing clearly, you stop being surprised by the storm. You move with wisdom, and you finally understand. Protecting your peace is not about controlling others. It's about responding to truth when it knocks. Stoicism doesn't say ignore the signs. It says pay attention and live accordingly.
Number 4.
You're afraid of confrontation. Let's get this straight. Confrontation isn't about yelling, arguing, or dramatic showdowns. True confrontation is about clarity. It's about standing in your truth without needing to raise your voice. Yet so many people avoid it entirely, not because they lack opinions, but because they fear the discomfort that comes with expressing them. That fear left unchecked becomes a pattern where your silence gives others permission to overstep, disrespect, and disregard you. Stoicism teaches us that fear is often born from a misjudgment of what is truly harmful. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But he also believed in the courage to speak plainly, especially when silence would compromise one's integrity. When you're afraid of confrontation, you end up betraying your own values just to keep the peace. A peace that is usually one-sided, temporary, and built on resentment. You tell yourself you're being the bigger person, that you're choosing harmony, but ask yourself, harmony for who? Because if your peace requires you to bite your tongue, suppress your needs, and accept what you internally reject, that's not peace, that's performance. And over time, the act becomes unbearable. You begin to dread conversations. You begin to fear honesty. You become agreeable on the outside and angry on the inside. Consider the example of Eleanor Roosevelt. Known for her calm strength, she was often in rooms where her presence was questioned, her values dismissed, but she confronted these moments with poise, not passivity. Her famous quote, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent," wasn't just about self-worth. It was about voicing your truth when it mattered most. That's the essence of confrontation done with dignity, not to dominate, but to declare. And still, many avoid it. Why? Because they equate disagreement with danger. But disagreement is natural. It's not disrespectful, it's human. The Stoics remind us that how others react is not within our control. What we say, however, that is, Epictetus put it best, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. Your fear of confrontation is not about the event. It's about your belief that you won't be able to handle it. So how do you unlearn that fear? You practice, you begin with the small things. You say, "Actually, I disagree." You say, "That doesn't work for me." You state what you need, clearly, calmly, and without apology. You stop padding every truth with disclaimers. You stop avoiding conversations just because they might be uncomfortable. And you remind yourself, discomfort is temporary, but disrespect that goes unchallenged becomes permanent. Over time, confrontation becomes less about conflict and more about honesty. You stop reacting, you start responding. You don't aim to win, you aim to be real. You no longer twist yourself to be accepted. You present yourself fully and let that be enough. And ironically, this kind of confrontation doesn't push people away. It filters them. Those who value real connection will stay. Those who depended on your silence will leave. And both outcomes serve your peace. In the end, confrontation is not chaos, it's clarity. It's not an attack. It's an alignment. When done with calm intention, it becomes a powerful tool for self-respect. You are not here to live muted. You are not here to be agreeable at your own expense. You are here to live honestly, to speak from your center, and to build relationships where truth is welcome. The Stoic doesn't seek conflict, but he doesn't avoid it either. He faces it, and in doing so, he is free.
Number 5.
You seek validation from others. One of the most overlooked reasons people take advantage of you is because you hand them the power to define your worth. You're always asking, sometimes silently, sometimes subtly, "Do you approve of me?" And when the answer is yes, you feel safe. But when it's no, or worse, silence, you spiral. This makes you easy to manipulate, because those who control your validation control your behavior. Stoic philosophy draws a hard line here, Marcus Aurelius wrote. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. That contradiction is the trap. You were not born needing the applause of strangers to feel alive. That was taught, conditioned, reinforced. Every time you chased a compliment or feared disapproval, that wire grew deeper in your mind, until one day you couldn't move without wondering how it would look to someone else. And from that moment, you stopped living freely. The cost? You begin to perform instead of live. You shape your words to fit someone else's taste. You shrink your truth to avoid discomfort. You wait to feel good until someone gives you permission. And the problem is that permission never lasts. You need another fix, another compliment, another sign that you're enough. And so you become predictable, controllable. Someone whose actions are driven not by principle, but by praise. Now let's be clear. It's not wrong to want to be appreciated. It's human. But when your identity depends on it, you lose your foundation. You become reactive, anxious, and worst of all, silent when you should speak, agreeable when you should resist, apologetic when you've done nothing wrong. This is not humility. This is emotional slavery. Look at someone like Alan Watts. He spoke often about the danger of looking to others to validate your being. He said, "You're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." Meaning, you're allowed to evolve on your own terms, not because others said it was okay, but because growth is internal, it belongs to you. And the moment you stop seeking constant reassurance is the moment you begin living from self-trust. So what's the Stoic response? It's radical. It says, live in alignment with your own reason. Epictetus put it this way: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's the test. Can you stay grounded when people misunderstand you? Can you stay true when you're not praised for it? Can you hold your center when validation is withheld? That's real strength. Not the kind that looks impressive, but the kind that lasts when the crowd walks away. Here's how you reclaim it. First, notice your patterns. When you're about to post something, ask, am I sharing truth or seeking applause? When you agree with someone, ask, is this my belief or my fear of rejection? When you apologize, ask, am I sorry or just uncomfortable with their disapproval? These questions aren't small, they're soul-saving. Then practice self-acknowledgement, not fake affirmations, but real recognition. Look at what you did today that was honest, that was difficult, that was kind. Don't wait for someone to clap. Clap for your own integrity. The Stoic doesn't live to impress. He lives to be free. Free from needing the crowd. Free from chasing gold stars. Free from bending every time the wind shifts. Because in the end, the person who respects themselves doesn't need to be loud. Their presence speaks. Their boundaries are known. Their peace isn't negotiable. When you stop seeking validation, you stop being played. You start leading, quietly, firmly, authentically. And that, according to the Stoics, is the only validation that truly matters. Number 6, you fear being alone. One of the deepest traps people fall into is mistaking connection for safety. You stay in draining relationships. You tolerate disrespect. You keep showing up for people who've stopped showing up for you. Not because you don't see the truth, but because you fear what will happen if you walk away. The silence, the absence, the empty space, that fear of solitude is what makes you settle, even when your soul is begging for distance. But Stoicism reframes solitude not as a punishment, but as a training ground, Seneca wrote. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. What we fear about being alone isn't the solitude itself. It's the stories we attach to it. We imagine we'll be forgotten, unloved, that our worth will vanish if no one is there to reflect it. But that's a lie, and the longer you believe it, the more power others hold over you. You don't stay because they deserve your loyalty. You stay because you've made them your mirror. And this is why people play you, because they can feel it. You won't leave. You won't disrupt the dynamic. You won't risk solitude even when the situation is hurting you. That fear becomes their leverage, and so long as you fear being alone, you will keep accepting crumbs and calling it a meal. You will confuse attachment with love. You will stay out of habit, not harmony. Consider someone like Frida Kahlo. Her life was filled with emotional pain, loss, and betrayal, but she also learned how to be with herself. Her art wasn't just expression, it was survival. It was solitude turned into creation. She once wrote, "I am my own muse." That line holds more truth than it seems, because when you stop fearing alone time, you stop looking outside yourself for permission to live. You stop needing constant company to feel secure. You return home to yourself and begin rebuilding from there. The Stoics understood this. They believed that the person who can sit with their own mind and not run from it is truly free. Marcus Aurelius journaled his deepest truths not for an audience, but to strengthen his own soul. His solitude was his discipline, his stillness was his clarity. And that's the shift. Instead of fearing what happens when no one is around, you begin to embrace what only happens when no one is around. Insight, peace, inner alignment. Now, solitude doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean rejecting connection. It means choosing presence over noise. It means being with yourself long enough to know your needs, your truth, your limits, without external interference. Because when you know yourself in silence, you won't lose yourself in company. You'll stop merging just to belong. You'll stop tolerating chaos just to avoid loneliness. You'll become the kind of person who attracts, not chases, who invites, not begs, who connects without clinging. So how do you start? Begin by breaking the habit of reaction. When you feel the urge to text someone just to fill space, pause when you reach for a distraction the second you feel alone. Breathe. Let that moment of discomfort stretch. Let it teach you, because in that space you'll begin to hear something deeper, your own voice, and that voice, when strengthened, will guide you better than any crowd. In the end, people stop playing you when you stop fearing distance, when you stop needing company to feel complete, when you stop chasing people who left you uncertain. The Stoic doesn't fear solitude. He uses it. He turns silence into strength, absence into self-respect. And from that place of grounded solitude, he chooses who enters his life, not from desperation, but from discernment. Number 7, you give too much without receiving. There's a kind of giving that comes from love, from abundance, from alignment. But then there's another kind, quieter, more dangerous. The kind of giving that comes from fear. Fear of losing people. Fear of being seen as selfish. Fear of being abandoned. And when your giving is rooted in fear, it becomes a pattern of over-functioning, overextending, and over-apologizing. You give not because you want to, but because you don't know how not to. And the people around you, they learn quickly that you'll always say yes, that you'll always be the bigger person, that your needs are negotiable, that your kindness is bottomless. And when that happens, your generosity is no longer a virtue. It becomes an invitation for exploitation. Stoicism teaches us that virtue must be guided by reason. As Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Giving, when done without boundaries, is not virtue, it's leakage. Now let's be honest. The world doesn't reward balanced givers. It praises martyrs, the ones who say yes to everything, who burn themselves out in the name of love. But here's what they don't tell you. Martyrdom is not noble if it's unconscious. If your generosity costs you your peace, your health, your dignity, it's not generosity, it's self-erasure. Look at someone like Brené Brown. Her research on vulnerability and boundaries revealed something essential. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. That applies directly here. Because if you can't say no, your yes means nothing. If you always give and never receive, you train the people around you to treat you as an endless resource, not a person. And over time, you start to feel it. The fatigue, the resentment, the quiet bitterness that bubbles up when you realize you're always the one reaching out, always the one picking up the slack, always the one absorbing the tension. But instead of pulling back, you give more, hoping that eventually someone will notice, that they'll give back, that they'll finally see what you've sacrificed. But most don't. Not because they're evil, but because they've been taught that this is your role. You showed them, and they followed your example. The Stoic doesn't give to be seen. He gives from principle, from alignment, from clarity. But he also knows when the giving becomes empty. He knows when to step back, not out of bitterness, but out of balance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, and sometimes your enemy isn't a person. It's the version of you that keeps giving without discernment." So how do you change it? Start with this truth. You are not responsible for everyone's comfort. You are allowed to disappoint others. You are allowed to protect your time. You are allowed to pause before you say yes. And when someone gives nothing in return, emotionally, energetically, spiritually, you are allowed to walk away, not in anger, in peace. And when you do give, let it be from overflow, not from emptiness. Give when it aligns. Give when it nourishes. But don't give in hopes of being chosen, or loved, or kept, because that's not giving. That's bargaining, and your soul is too valuable for that kind of trade. In the end, the people who truly value you will want to give back. They'll notice, they'll show up, they'll meet you halfway, and those who don't, let them go. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to honor the sacred balance between giving and keeping something for yourself. The Stoic gives wisely, protects deliberately, and lives peacefully. So should you. If you've recognized yourself in these 7 patterns, don't shame yourself. Awareness is not a weakness. It's the beginning of power. The moment you stop blaming others for how they treat you and start owning the behaviors that invite it, is the moment everything begins to shift. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Control what you can, which is always your own mind, your own choices, your own standards. You're not here to be played. You're here to walk with clarity, speak with purpose, and give with discernment. And that begins by treating yourself with the same respect you keep handing to others. So pause, reflect, and then rise. Not in anger, but in calm authority. If this spoke to something real in you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more Stoic strategies that cut through noise and bring you back to strength. And remember, the way you allow others to treat you is the way you're teaching them who you are.